Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, March 18, 2025, and our friend Scott Ritter is back with us. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get started with this tweet that Donald Trump he tweeted in 2019. He said the United States has spent $8 trillion fighting and policing the Middle East. Thousands of our great soldiers have died and been badly wounded. Millions of people have died on the other side. Going into the Middle East is the worst decision ever made. And here is 2025 and the new Trump 2.0. How do you find the way that he's trying to deal with the Middle East?
Stupid, asinine, insane. This is extremely disappointing because that Donald Trump was updated. Look, let's just clear the air here, because there's a lot of people, out there. I told you so. I told you so. I knew best. And I'm like, well, screw you. So what? You're gloating because there's dead children? You're happy because there's dead children? I told you so. See, dead children. People that believed in Donald Trump were trying to avoid dead children. And there's just a lot of people out there that seem to be angry that at some point in time, I and others said, hey, why don't we give this a shot? Why don't we, take him at face value and see if in fact he's serious about doing this and promoting, the concept of peace, because you can do better than going back to 2019, Nima. You know this. You know that recently, I think it was in December, he posted video clips of Jeffrey Sachs that was condemning Benjamin Netanyahu for getting America involved in those wars that Donald Trump was condemning. You know that, and your audience knows as well. All right? That's the Donald Trump I was supporting. The man that said, I'm not going to fall into the trap of Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm not going to get America dragged into yet another Middle East conflict, this time with Iran, that ends up with dead Americans, trillions of dollars expended. That's the guy that I was saying, all right, let's give this a shot. Let's see if he can do this. We always knew this was going to be tough. I mean, the United States is so deeply entwined, entangled in this Israeli mess, this Zionist philosophy, this, however you want to articulate what the state of Israel is, and how it has insinuated itself into the American body politic, that making peace was always going to be a mission impossible. I mean, but what was the alternative? I mean, the Biden administration was knee deep in a genocide of its own making. At least Donald Trump stopped the genocide. And I just challenge anybody to say it. He stopped it. Can you contradict me on that, Nima? Donald Trump stopped the genocide. Can you say no, he didn't? Don't tell me what happened yesterday. I'm talking about when he was the power behind bringing a ceasefire that had Palestinians dancing in the streets of Gaza in joy. Donald Trump did that. All right. Now, moving forward, he has to deal with the complexity of an Israeli government led by Benjamin Netanyahu, the man who Donald Trump singled out as being responsible for dragging America into war. So one would think that having articulated a posture that said, I know the problem, and the problem is Benjamin Netanyahu, and I'm not going to let him take me down the path of prior presidents whom I condemned for getting dragged in the wars, you could say, okay, if that's his foundational thinking, then everything he's doing up here is tactical in nature, meaning that he's dealing with situations as they arise, complicated situations that no American president has been able to solve ever, and he's trying to move things. So you give him the benefit of the doubt. You say, well, that's a hell of a statement you made about Gaza there, putting 100,000 American troops in there and forcefully, evicting the Palestinians. Um, how does that equate with what you said? Well, then you have to say, well, maybe he was looking for a counter proposal, and lo and behold, a counter proposal shows up, and you say, "Ooh, maybe the concept of tactical maneuvering to achieve a strategic objective, maybe it makes sense." And so you go on and you see him, taking a harsh stance against the Iranians, irrationally harsh. But I mean, wasn't that stance he took about Gaza and the depopulation of Gaza irrationally harsh? And yet it resulted in a counter proposal. So you say, well, good Lord, okay, trying to look at past, actions. Maybe he's just setting the stage to compel Iran into taking a different tack, one that maybe the indirect approach. Again, because you're always scrambling trying to figure out what the hell Donald Trump's doing, because his statements make no sense. They're way out here, except when you relate them to the foundational philosophy that you have articulated in your tweet. To avoid a war, you're like, gosh, how do we square the two? We have to assume that what he's doing is not to get us into a war, but get us out of a war. Maybe recognizing the difficulty of American-Iranian relations right now, he's deliberately trying to drive the Iranians into the hands of the Russians. And it appeared that's what they were doing. The Iranian president said, we will never deal with you, America, but we will deal with others. And, he was having a conversation with Vladimir Putin about how to resolve Gaza and how to resolve Iran. So you could, it's not a stretch of the imagination to say maybe he's punting to Putin, to let Putin take over this thing to achieve the ultimate result of denuclearization and peace. And then the Israelis break the ceasefire and bomb Gaza. This could have been stopped by Trump. Didn't have to happen. But it appears that the United States is 100% behind this action. And now we see the United States carrying out actions against the Houthi, because the Houthi, of course, have always linked their actions in the Red Sea as being linked to Gaza and the humanitarian situation there. And if Israel breaks the ceasefire, the Houthi begin attacking. So now we've doubled down on that, and it appears that we are moving in the direction towards conflict with Iran. So the very thing that Trump said he wasn't going to allow to happen, that he was cognizant of, the forces that drag us in that direction, and he gave it a name, Benjamin Netanyahu. He's basically allowed Netanyahu to put him in a position where America is heading towards another Middle East conflict that will cost American lives and bankrupt us. And this one could get even worse. This could be the ultimate bankruptcy machine. If we do, in fact, get into a major conflict with Iran, the impact on global energy security will be devastating and will have a horrific impact on the American economy at a time when Donald Trump can't afford to have that. All the changes he's trying to do, which I call revolutionary in nature, are predicated upon some form of economic stability, predictable economic trajectories. When you have, the price of oil shoot up to $120, $200 a barrel, it's going to be devastating. So I don't understand why he did what he did. This makes no sense. There's nothing about it that squares with the foundational philosophy that Donald Trump has been expressing over time since 2019 and up until recently, that said he wanted to avoid the very thing he's now has got us entangled in. I can't make any sense of it.
It's so amazing to see how Netanyahu has some sort of lot of leverage on the US government. And while he has a lot of problem in Israel, he's struggling and he's just fighting for his position. But he has a lot of leverage.
I disagree, though. I disagree. Netanyahu has no leverage, none. That's what makes this all the more stunning. If he had leverage, he would have told Steve Witkoff, get the hell out of my office, when Witkoff showed up and said, sit down, shut up, you're going to accept a ceasefire. If Netanyahu had leverage, he would have said, pound sand, leave. I will pull all the strings I can and bring your pathetic presidency down, because I am Benjamin Netanyahu. I am the Zionist king of the world. I control it. He controls nothing. Nothing. This is a self-inflicted wound, which is what makes it all the more amazing, because you could explain away, say, well, at the end of the day, Donald Trump is controlled by Benjamin Netanyahu. He's not. Donald Trump can flick Netanyahu away like a pesky fly. This is a deeper issue. This has less to do with Netanyahu pulling the strings and everything to do with the what's going on inside Donald Trump's brain. This concept of peace through strength. That's the problem. It's not Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu is a nobody, a nothing. Literally, he has no power. Just you tell me, what can Benjamin Netanyahu do right now? Name one thing he could do right now that causes Donald Trump problems. Name it. Go. You can't. I can play the Jeopardy theme song all day long, and you can't tell me anything. What? He can, they can put $100 million into the congressional race. That ain't for 2 years. We just had the election. That card's been played. Done. He can impact, the selection of the cabinet? Already been done. Miriam Adelson can make a phone call. She'll never get through. She already gave her $100 million. Too late. Benjamin Netanyahu can do nothing. Nothing. We can do everything. We can hit the off switch on everything and make that pathetic little nation go away. But we don't. And we don't for a number of reasons. Because we are heavily addicted to Israel because of the political, insinuation that's taken place in America. But none of that prevents Donald Trump from saying to Netanyahu, sit down and shut up. We would not be where we are today had Donald Trump picked up the phone and said, hey, Bibi, open up the borders, let the humanitarian good in. That or I shut off all the switches. I mean, it's the easiest phone call to make. He didn't make it. Why? Because Bibi has power over him? Nope. Because Israel provides the predicate for Trump's grand vision of stability in the Middle East. This is a Trump problem, not a Netanyahu problem. You see, Donald Trump has built a vision of Middle East peace and prosperity that is contingent upon Israel normalizing relations with other nations. We know this because that was the heart and soul of the Abraham Accords. That's what it was all about. And it almost happened. On October 6th, 2023, we were talking about the potential of normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. That would have been the ultimate victory. When Joe Biden in September of 2023 at the G20 meeting in India came out and talked about the India-Middle East Economic Corridor, Netanyahu got up and gave a speech where he said, this is the greatest moment in modern Israeli history. The greatest moment. Why? Because it took Israel out of being this cancerous body that's causing conflict all over and elevated it into a major, regional economic player that was driving the well-being of the region, that it was becoming insinuated with all the other players, so much so that it could never be excised out. It meant Israel was permanent. Greater Israel was permanent part of the Middle East. The greatest moment in modern Israeli history. And Donald Trump was the architect of that. Even though Biden was the president, Donald Trump started that. And in Donald Trump's mind, he has to get back to that. That's the framework of peace that he's talking about. But it requires Israel to be the centerpiece because he's incapable of envisioning a structure of peace that minimizes Israel. His job is to maximize Israel, which means he has to end this conflict that Israel's in terms that are favorable to Israel. And this is the mission impossible. How can you have peace where, especially where Israel spent 15 months getting its, head bashed in by Hamas? Yes, there was genocide. I'm not there. Yes, the Palestinians, but Hamas wasn't defeated. Hamas won. It's not me saying that. The Israeli generals say that. Hamas won. Hamas beat Israel. And so now you're going to say, well, forget that. Forget history. Hamas must go away. Now, there's ways to make Hamas go away. Hamas knows this. That's why Hamas was part of the 14 Palestinian factions that flew to Moscow, that flew to Beijing to talk about creating a political singularity that would take the name Hamas off of the marquee and put something else up there. But Hamas would be intermingled down here. So they would stop being the headliner, but be part of, the main body. We could have gone that route. but we didn't, because see, that changes things. That now that the simplistic Abrams Accord, Israel is the center of everything, that model doesn't apply, and Trump didn't have an alternative model. And so he got trapped into this. It's not that Netanyahu trapped him. Trump trapped himself into this model because he was incapable of conceiving a solution that had Hamas emerging victorious. And what's troubling about that conclusion, which I buy into because I just made it, is he was apparently engaged in negotiations with Hamas, which is a step that no other presidency has taken. And that's what I don't understand. On the one hand, he is capable of taking these risky moves. Again, whatever you want to say about Donald Trump, he sat down, he negotiated directly with the Taliban to get out of Afghanistan. Nobody else was doing that. He did it. He met with Kim Jong-un. Nobody else did that. He did it. This is a man who is capable of breaking the mold in terms of standard diplomatic practices and going out and taking risks. Why couldn't he continue the risk taking? That's what I don't understand. That's what I can't comprehend. And it gets to the psychology again of peace through strength. And I guess he was feeling vulnerable. Maybe in his mind, he was being asked to make too many concessions to peace, and he needed to, reestablish the concept of strength. It's impossible to know. Is it possible that he can go out there and flex his muscles, then back off and say, "See, this is the potential of American military power"? The problem with it is that you're using this against the Houthi, who've been bombed by American military power by proxy or directly since 2014. They're not going to back down. I mean, we've started an existential fight with the Houthi, meaning in order for us to win, we have to destroy them. And again, I just want to remind people, Ansarallah and the Houthi, where does this notion come from? I'm not an expert on Islam. I don't pretend to be one, but my understanding is that the Houthi provided safety to, the Prophet Muhammad when he was transiting the area. They are the protectors of Islam. I mean, and this is part of their very essence. We're not playing with, simple hill folk here. We're playing with people who are actually very sophisticated, who can build sophisticated weapon systems, who have imbued into them a notion of Islamic purity, not fanaticism like the Wahhabists or, head chopping, but purity, meaning that they are driven to support those who need support. That's why they're supporting the Palestinians, because they believe in this. They believe that it is their duty, their responsibility to do this. And we're going to bomb them into submission. We're going to bomb people who believe that by giving their life in defense of this pure mission they have, they will go to paradise. They believe this. Where are the advisors to Donald Trump? Where are the people who are supposed to be telling him, "Don't do this, bad move, boss"? Well, we know it's not going to be Pete Hegseth. He's the one who's out there, speaking about, I forget what he said. It's the equivalent of, "We're going to bomb you into submission."
We're talking about peace through strength.
Right. But he said, "We're going to pummel you and do all." Marco Rubio, he has no understanding of the region of the Houthi. Tulsi Gabbard, God bless her. I have a lot of respect for her, but she's so focused on Islamic extremism that she somehow has been blinded, and now she is calling the Houthi Islamic extremists, equating them with Al-Qaeda and ISIS when they're the furthest thing from Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Donald Trump is not well served, and he's not a man who has the inherent capabilities of formulating these positions on his own. He wants peace. I still honestly believe that this is a man who wants peace, but he doesn't know how to get from where we are to peace, because he keeps being dragged down the path of war by his own inner demons and by the advice of those around him.
Here is what Hegseth said that you mentioned.
This campaign is about freedom of navigation and restoring deterrence. The minute the Houthis say, be very clear, this campaign is about freedom of navigation and restoring deterrence. The minute the Houthis say, we'll stop shooting at your ships, we'll stop shooting at your drones, this campaign will end. But until then, it will be unrelenting. We got the reports last night, Maria. The Houthi capital felt like an earthquake. Dozens and dozens of precision-heavy munitions dropping precisely on the targets that we wanted to hit, sending a very clear message. And the message is clear to Iran as well. And the president said it in his truth. Your support of the Houthis needs to end immediately. We will hold you accountable as the sponsor of this proxy. And I echo his statement. We will not be nice about it. This is not the Biden administration. The message is clear. We will come after the Houthis until they stop shooting at our ships, and the Iranians better stay out of it.
You know, when he's talking about the Biden administration, it seems to me that he doesn't know. I don't know if they have provided him with the information about the fight that the Biden administration had with Houthis. They have been bombing Houthis, and it wasn't just the easy way. They did everything possible to fight them. But it seems that Pete Hegseth comes out and says, no, the way that we're dealing with Houthis is totally different. They haven't seen anything like this that we are doing to them. How do you think that he knows what has happened during the Biden administration?
I'm sure he's briefed on it, but this is a man who has an irrational belief in the supremacy of American firepower. Look, I've served in the American military in times of war, in times of peace. We are very capable. In some ways, we're the most capable military on the planet. There's no other force in the world that can project military power globally like the United States of America. No other military could do what we're doing in Yemen. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying that we're unique in that ability. And so sometimes with the capabilities comes, a cockiness that borders on irrational. But I'm also somebody that I was an intelligence officer who spent a lot of time doing targeting. And I am intimately familiar with Central Command, which is running this conflict, and the inadequacies of their intelligence staff. I know for a fact that Central Command has a tendency to do a lot of speculation. They are victims of their own inherent prejudices and of intellectual modeling that they do that's based upon a lack of understanding. Look, this dates back to the Gulf War. I was heavily involved in the targeting of Iraqi Scud missiles, both in terms of their production capacity, their command and control, and their operational, activities that we tried to interdict their launches. I will tell you that, and this became evident when I became a weapons inspector in the United Nations afterwards, because I had an opportunity. It was a unique opportunity to participate in the active targeting of this target deck, and then go into Iraq afterwards and visit every place we attacked and get the truth about it. We misidentified the vast majority of the targets we bombed. We claimed that we did more destruction on them than we did. And oftentimes we were hitting things that had nothing to do with what we thought they were doing. And when it came to mobile relocatable targets like the Scud missile, we blew up more Bedouin tents, more truck stops, more buses, more fuel tankers, more private vehicles than we did Scuds. We didn't kill a single Scud launcher in the entire war, despite diverting thousands of combat sorties dedicated to that task. But we did kill thousands of innocent Iraqis and hundreds of innocent Jordanian truck drivers. We slaughtered Bedouin families because we mistake a Bedouin tent filled with sheep, because it was wintertime, so they bring the sheep at night, and you get a heat target that looks cylindrical, so you bomb it, saying, I got a Scud missile. No, you didn't. You killed a Bedouin. And when I say Bedouin family, I'm not talking about, a single nuclear element, father, mother, some kids. I'm talking about a collection of families that come together. So it's not just 5 people you killed 35 people in a tent together with their means of living. We did this over and over and over and over again. And we never learned the lesson. It was repeated in Alaska. It was repeated in Afghanistan. It's repeated every time we go to war. We don't understand the people that we're targeting. We don't understand how they operate, what they're doing. The Houthi have been, again, Pete has to understand this. The American intelligence that's used to create the targeting wasn't invented yesterday. It's been actually applied on the Houthi target since 2014, when we started supporting the Saudi campaign against the Houthi. And we have been using American intelligence, the totality of it. Central Command's been behind this the whole time, collecting on the Houthi, turning that into targets that we turn over to the Saudis, who then bomb them using American airplanes and American bombs. So this campaign that Hegseth is running right now is not something that just happened yesterday. It's been going on since 2014, and we haven't beaten the Houthi yet. And now we're suddenly saying that if we just ratchet it up, how do you ratchet it up? Again, I've been there. I understand what happened. Find me more targets. What do you want? More targets? That just means I have to become more creative and looking at things I don't understand. And so now you start saying, well, gosh, what are we looking for? A truck park. Oh, here's a truck park. Here's a truck park. Here's a truck park. And we bombed those, but all we bombed was truck parks. They're not what we thought they are. They aren't the source of the mobile launchers. What are we looking for? Underground facilities. Well, look, there's a door into the side of a hill. Let's bomb that. And we just start bombing things we don't understand. We don't know what we're doing. We give them names. We get incomplete, cause effect. We get signals intelligence where they talk about, the Al Mamoun factory. But now we look where it is, but there's an Al Mamoun water distribution center, but we just see Al Mamoun. We say, there's the factory. Bam, we had a water distribution center, kill a bunch of civilians. We didn't do anything. This is what's happening right now. Hegseth, he's shaking the Capitol. Congratulations, Pete. You drop enough bombs, you make the ground shake. If you think those people are scared, look what's happened in the streets today of that city, filled with millions of Yemenis, of Houthis or Ansarallah saying, no, bring it on. We're here. We're willing to, they'll do this forever. You will never break them, ever, ever. What will happen though, Pete, and I'm just predicting the future here, this is going to become a horribly expensive campaign. The Biden administration found that out too. Right now, they're talking about diverting up to 3 carrier battle groups into the region. This costs a lot of money. Where's that money come from? We just did a continuing resolution. So there's no, additional funds. We're going to be eating into we're going to run into the same problem that the Biden administration ran into, which is we have depleted operational funds. We now have to cut into training. We have to cut into other things to fund this war that was not funded. We didn't predict this war. We weren't prepared for this war. This administration's too young to have built up a budgetary reserve for this. So we are literally, we've gone through the fat and we are now consuming the muscle of the American military. This war is making us weaker. We are expending munitions for which we don't have an industrial base geared up to replace. How long are we going to fire multi-million-dollar cruise missiles at targets we don't understand? We will run out of bombs before the Houthi ever quit. And then what? We're going to take this on to Iran? I mean, we're going to find out the hard way that Iran isn't the weak nation. I mean, here's the other problem that we have. There are people telling, Trump, Iran's a house of cards. Blow hard and they go down. Now, normally I would say, well, how stupid can you be? Except we just had Syria go down. And who amongst us predicted that? No one. No one. There's not a single person in the world that said Syria's going down like a house of cards. And down it went. So now, I haven't been to Iran in a while. I don't know the true state of affairs. I know that there's, dissension between the president and the supreme leader, that there's tension there, and between him and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command, there's some tension there. I know there's extreme economic difficulties in Iran, but I also know that in 2023, Iran was stress tested, that the CIA, MI6, and others brought all their proxies up together in the aftermath of the tragic death of that Kurdish girl at the hands of the police. And they attempted a regime change operation. I spoke to President Raisi about it in September 2023. He said it was one of the greatest threats to the existence of Iran since the Iran-Iraq war. He said it was a big problem, but Iran beat it. The Iranian people rallied around. That was 2023. This is 2025. A lot can change since then. I mean, hell, Syria was stress tested all the way up until 2020 and found that, they were solid. They could push back against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, and all that. But a few years later, bam, down they go. So is it irrational for Donald Trump to be told if we just pressure Iran, they will collapse? I mean, I disagree with, but I don't have perfect intelligence on that. And again, somebody can say, look what happened to Syria. Just pressure them the right way and they will collapse. So maybe that's what's driving him right now. Maybe what Donald Trump is trying to do is take a shortcut, basically saying it was too complicated to negotiate with Hamas and all this. We're going to take down Hamas, collapse Iran, and then peace will break out all over. I don't know, because he hasn't done a good job of articulating what this strategy is. And his spokespeople, I mean, other than Pete Hegseth talking about, shaking, the Houthi into submission through bombs, which is just stupid. He should know better. Where are the intelligence analysts? I mean, I'm not unique. There are people in there that they're smart. There's people that know how to put two and two together to connect the dots. Why aren't they standing up saying, this ain't going to work? Well, that means that the Trump administration has done what past administrations have done. Remove the professionals and bring in the ideologues, the yes men or yes women, people who are incapable of telling the president the truth and instead tell the president what he wants to hear, which is, if we just do this, this will happen. I don't know. This is very frustrating because I had hoped we were on a path towards peace. And right now we don't seem to be on a path towards peace.
I can say that Iran doesn't have anything to do with Syria. It's on much more complicated. They have their differences,
I
but
agree with
that doesn't make any sort of external policy for Iran. They know what they're looking after. They're looking for, and the difference is the policy, that the way that they're gonna negotiate is not something substantial, Scott. It's not something that would collapse the Iranian government.
I know that. I'm saying that the Trump administration, again, first of all, Nima, understand this. I'm speculating because the Trump administration hasn't put out a white paper that says this is our strategy, this is how we're doing it. I mean, we can criticize the Biden administration all we want, and I made a career out of criticizing them, but at least they gave us a foundation of intellectual thought that said this is our policy, and I could look at it and go and then spend my life picking it apart, sniping, long range sniping, but Trump hasn't even given us that. We don't have anything. We are basing ourselves upon social media posts that are all over the map. Trying to follow a Trump press conference is an exercise in futility if you're looking for intellectual consistency. I oftentimes I don't like watching them because it just angers me. I mean, I get angry when I watch Trump speak because it's just irrational blustering, but you have to listen to his words because we're in the, back in the old days in Soviet times. I mean, honest to God, we had all the intelligence capabilities in the world, but people actually waited for, Victory Day or the, revolution celebrations in November to look at the reviewing stand and go, okay, where's Brezhnev? Okay, who's next to Brezhnev? Ooh, he moved one space over. What does that mean? What does that mean if this guy's there? This guy's not there. What does that mean? And they were doing this. This is criminology. I mean, Kremlinology. Literally the exact opposite of what an intelligence professional should be doing, which is reading, the statements and looking at how the statements, interact with actual policy and things. Instead, we're looking at photographs, seeing where people are and their body language and all that, trying to discern, because we had no clue. And so that's what happens with Trump. You have to listen to these asinine, inane statements he makes because it's the only clue you have. You have to listen to it and say, I'm hoping I hear something. Oh, and then you're hoping upon hope that that is, an indication of real intent, that all the other crap that he said is just nonsense and bluster, and we're just going for this. It's very frustrating being a Trump analyst. It's an exercise in futility and frustration.
When it comes to the way that they see the conflict with Houthis, here is what Rubio said, Scott. It doesn't seem that they have a clear message, clear sort of message to Houthis, or a clear image of what would be the future of this conflict. Here is what Rubio said.
Have these people controlling which ships can go through and which ones cannot. And so your question is, how long will this go on? It will go on until they no longer have the capability to do that.
So how they can measure that? How is that possible?
It can't. Marco Rubio is an idiot. I mean, I hate
the same sort of policy that we've been witnessing with Russia. They say we'd sanction Russia, fighting Russia in Ukraine, just Russia would collapse from within.
Except I think this administration understands the difference is Russia has proven through 3 years of sustained combat that it is not a power to be trifled with. And there are consequences for getting peace wrong with Russia, which is why I think right now they're speaking. President Putin and Trump are speaking as we're recording this. So I don't think the phone call is Trump. All right, Vladimir, this is the way it's going to be. You're going to do this, you're going to do that, or else we're going to do this. We're going to shut your economy down. I don't think that's the way the conversation's going at all. I think it's hey, Mr. President, we're concerned about this. Our people have talked, and we've mentioned the following. These are some things that we'd like you to consider. And Putin will say, thank you very much for saying this. On this one, we think there's some way we can work. This one is more difficult. We're going to have to do some more massaging on this. And then Trump isn't going to go, no, you will do it our way, or we will bomb you and make your capital shake. It doesn't work that way with Russia. Because Russia's powerful, they have nuclear weapons, and they've proven over 3 years that they can beat NATO in a stand-up fight, which includes the United States conventionally. So but the Houthi, I mean, on the one hand, again, people should be advising Pete, hey, Pete, we already tried the 3-carrier thing. Didn't work. But what happens is they start hitting us with missiles, and we have to pull outside of their range. And then the next thing you know, we've extended our time on station until we deplete all the ammunition. And then we have to withdraw, and now we're bankrupt. We don't have follow-on carrier. Pete, this isn't a good idea. They don't quit. They don't quit at all. But no, we're arrogant. We think we can bond them into submission. And Rubio's statement is, I will make the following prediction, that the carrier battle groups will withdraw from station before the Houthi quit, because the Houthi will never quit, and the carrier battle groups will run out of ammunition. That's a guaranteed outcome here. And what we're going to kill now, what are we going to do? Go into collective punishment? Because at some point in time, we're going to get frustrated because we're going to be bombing things, and it's not stopping the Houthi from launching their missiles against ships. And so we get frustrated. So now what? We embrace the Israeli tactic of collective punishment. We start bombing, civilian areas, and then the death toll goes up. And now we're guilty of committing genocide. And what are we going to do? Put a counter blockade on them and prevent humanitarian goods from coming in, so that we have millions of starving Yemeni children like we have had in the past. Understand that didn't cause the Houthi to stop fighting before, by the way. I just want to let everybody know that we have already done the starve the children in order to make them submit a game, and it didn't work. It's just going to blow back on us. It's going to make us look bad, and it's going to make us look weak, ultimately. This is just the opposite of peace through strength. This is weakness by pretending to be strong when you're not.
Do you think if the situation escalates between the United States and Yemen, that is the Trump administration able to force the Arab states into the conflict with Yemen?
No, they've already done it. I mean, again, what are we asking? We're asking Saudi Arabia to commit forces, and they've done that, and they got beat by the Houthi. You know, it's been there, done that. They got the T-shirt. United Arab Emirates, you want to get them to come back in? No, they've done that. They got beat. And remember what happened. The Houthi launched drones that took out oil, threatened critical strategic infrastructure. And they brought in the totality of their air power backed by American intelligence, and they couldn't stop it. Couldn't stop it. It's a big country. Look at it. It's big. It's not easy to fly aircraft over that country and get that. During the Gulf War in Western Iraq, we used to have combat sorties, F-15Es, Strike Eagles, flying at night and A-10s flying at day. But night was the most popular time for the Iraqis to launch. And we'd have the combat air patrols over there, and we'd have all the intelligence. So when the Iraqis would fire a missile, sometimes we were only 5 or 6 minutes away. But by the time we came in to the target, they were gone. They were gone. There was nothing to bomb. And so we futilely look around and we find trucks moving down the highway that aren't missile related, but they're fuel tankers. We say, oh, well, they're long and they're cylindrical, and we're pissed, so bomb them. So we blow up the trucks. We didn't stop the missiles. We didn't kill a single Iraqi Scud launcher in the entire war. Targeting is difficult, especially over a tough thing. We try to put loitering drones over the MQ-9s, and the Houthi are shooting them down. I mean, I forget, they've shot down a whole bunch of them. These are expensive things. It adds up to a lot of money. But they basically shot down over a squadron's worth of MQ-9 Reaper drones. Over a squadron. We've lost a squadron of Reaper drones over Yemen in this fight. and so I don't know what Hegseth, is he going to reinvent, the laws of war? Suddenly, because Pete Hegseth comes in and he has his little infantry thing, and I'm a war fighter and I run with the guys. And because I run with the guys, we're going to do things more efficiently. Well, there's been professional military people out there trying to accomplish this mission before you were Secretary of Defense, Pete. And they can't do it because it's impossible. You don't have enough aircraft. We diverted in the Gulf War over 2,500 sorties into Western Iraq. 2,500. And you got a carrier battle group with a wing, one wing, dozens of aircraft, dozens, not thousands, dozens, not hundreds, dozens. And you're going to cover the expanse of Yemen with that? Are you high? And the answer is he must be, because this isn't going to work. It can't work. It's a military impossibility. We don't have the resources to begin to do this. We would have to literally bring in almost the totality of America's existing strike capacity and base it on land bases around Yemen and flood the zone 24/7, which we did in Western Iraq during the Gulf War, and we still didn't accomplish the mission. So, no, we can't do this. It's impossible to do this. Satellites are good, but at the end of the day, it's what's in the analyst's head. There was a time when we had analysts who spent their entire career looking at a target, their entire career. And God, they knew everything. I mean, if a mouse dug a hole in the field next to it, they would say, that mouse doesn't normally dig a hole this time of year, so there's something doing that. So let's look at what caused the vibrations. I'm being ridiculous here, but I'm just saying that that's the intimacy they had with the target. Then what happened is the Cold War ended, and we started this whole thing where we said, well, we can't. It's not cost efficient to hire somebody and have them sit in the same desk for 30 years. I mean, that's just not good. We need to have these people go out there and get more. So instead of being an absolute expert on your subject, we became, these people with diversity. And I saw this when I was doing the Iraq thing. The CIA would bring in their photo interpreter teams. And, initially we had people that actually had studied the target. And you go, okay, these guys know. But then they retired or pushed aside. They brought in these new people who had been doing it for 6 months. You don't know anything about a target in 6 months. And they were briefing. They had no clue what they were briefing. They couldn't even pronounce the name right. They had no clue of the history of the target. And then by the time they became familiar through repetition, they were rotated out and a new group were rotated in. And this is what happens in CENTCOM. You don't have any experts in CENTCOM. You have specialists who get rotated in. They take control of a target thing. But the other thing is, there's nobody that has the big picture anymore. They're all looking at tiny little fractions, but they're not allowed to make their conclusions. They have to drive it up because intelligence now is just so carefully managed. They have layers of management overboard. I used to be, as a junior captain, God. Why? Because I was the guy. Junior captain. I was given the job of doing it. And I would do it. And I was responsible for briefing the big guy. There might be, 1 or 2 layers of management, but they didn't get in the way too much. They were just like, well, what do you got here? Let's facilitate in here. But today the analyst has to give it to his, initial management who, looks at it, proofreads it. The other thing is they farm it out. It used to be you'd work right there at Central Command. And they come down and you'd have to go and talk to the boss. And the boss would have to look in your eyes and say, well, how do you know this? And if he sees fear, he's like uncertainty, whatever. Nope. Now they break it up into packages and they send it out here, there, and everywhere. And we saw that when we had that idiot airman up in Massachusetts leak documents. Why was a guy in Massachusetts, a reservist, having access to sensitive, intelligence documentation about a conflict in Russia? Because the way we've decentralized this is that was his task to given it. He doesn't know anything. It's a cut and paste job. There's no analysis happening here. It's cut and paste. He's putting together, assembling into a product that gets set up, and the product is meaningless. Go look at those documents. The stuff that's in there is wrong, most of it. But it's got top secret information and all this stuff. There's no genuine analysis there. There's no effort to sit there and actually take the stuff, eat it, digest it, and then regurgitate it as some sort of intelligence that's derived and thought out, etc. They don't allow people to do that anymore. It's literally just a cut and paste job. There's no experts on anything. I challenge CENTCOM to bring your Houthi expert here and have a discussion. They won't. But the person isn't an expert. How long have you been doing the job? Well, I was rotated in last September. It's not his fault or her fault. They have a career and they get rotated here, there, and everywhere. But there used to be a time when you had genuine experts who knew the language, knew the culture, had done tours over there. But the problem is they went native. You can't have an analyst going native. You can't have an analyst saying, yeah, well, when I was in Sana'a, well, you were in Sana'a? Yeah. Why would you want to be there? You met a Houthi? Yeah, man. Did they corrupt you? Did they take control of you? Oh, we have to replace this guy and bring in somebody who's never been there, never met them, doesn't speak the language, because then we'll know that his analysis is pure. Instead of having somebody who's there and knows the people. We don't do that anymore. It takes too much time. Nobody has the patience. And to be honest, nobody wants that guy or gal. Why? Because the way our politicians work today is they want the intelligence community to reinforce conclusions they've already made. They don't want to sit there and have somebody tell, especially somebody like Donald Trump. You think Donald Trump wants to have somebody tell him what's going on? No, Donald Trump sits there, he's the best at everything. Best at everything. And, well, I have read, I am the greatest expert on the Houthi in America today. And so I am going to dictate outcomes, and I don't want anybody coming to me and telling me I'm wrong. You can't even get into his office to tell him he's wrong. And the first time you do that is the last time you're in his office. That's not the way this works. Bring on Ray McGovern. He used to brief the president and the vice president. Ask him, was it his job to say, Mr. President, how do I make you happy today? Or was his job to say, Mr. President, this is the real state of affairs in the world today that you got to deal with as commander in chief. These are problems, and that's what you need. But we don't do that anymore. I was hoping that Tulsi would change that. And to be fair, we're still so young into this. I don't even know if they've decided how they're going to brief the president and what format they're going to brief him and who's going to do the briefing yet. But the point is, somebody has to get next to him and tell him he's wrong. And just say, Mr. President, you're wrong. This is the truth. This is how it works. Somebody did that with Russia because we saw him break from the Keith Kellogg pattern. And he's taken on a new. So somebody got to him. Maybe it was Steve Witkoff after meeting with Putin. I think it happened before that. I think something happened that triggered him sending Steve Witkoff instead of Kellogg. But somebody got to him about Russia and said, you're wrong. Because you saw a dramatic departure from the way he was dealing with Russia and Ukraine to what he's doing now. Somebody needs to do that about the Houthi, somebody and Iran. Get to him and say, this ain't the way, this isn't going to work. This is a disaster. But now we're committed to the fight. That's the problem. Peace through strength. Well, God, now that you're committed to the fight, anything less than total victory, especially the way that Rubio and Hegseth have articulated it, is a sign of weakness. And you can't have peace through weakness. So we're in trouble. We're in a lot of trouble right now.
And when you talk about someone in the United States, or can be Xi or Putin talking to Trump in terms of the Iranian nuclear program, because we know that there was a meeting among the three leaders, the president of Iran, and a meeting between Russia, China, and Iran.
Well, see, that's what gave me the faith that Trump was taking what I call the indirect approach, recognizing the political, because if somebody came to him and told him the reality, which is, this is my personal belief of what I believe the reality of is in Iran today. They desperately want good relations with the West, from the supreme leader on down. But politically, they've been betrayed by the West too many times, and the hardliners who have come to into dominance, they don't trust the West anymore. They don't trust the West at all. And so it's impossible for those who want better relations with the West to seek better relations with the West through direct interaction with the West. That's what the president wants to do, but he's not going to be allowed to do it. China and Russia have built trust within Iran. And again, this is reading tea leaves because I'm not familiar with the negotiating record between Russia and Iran on the strategic agreement that they've signed, but I do know that I believe there's clauses in there that talk about Russia providing nuclear power plants for Iran. This is big because that means that Iran is departing from its past posture that says we will build our own nuclear power plants and we will provide the fuel for these. Therefore, we need the entirety of the fuel cycle under our control. For Russia to come in and say, no, we're going to build these nuclear power plants and we're going to provide the fuel for these plants, it takes away the argument that Iran must have this for their national survival and national security. And I think that was done on purpose. The Iranians aren't stupid. They're very smart. And so to allow that to be in there and to embrace it and to sign it, it's a signal from the Iranians saying that we are creating an off-ramp from the position that we currently hold. And I believe that China is also involved in negotiating for the potential of an off-ramp. I was hopeful that Trump was briefed on this because he had conversations with Putin and that he would say, okay, then what I need to do is shut down the potential of direct negotiations between the West and Iran. I need to breathe legitimacy into the alternative, because as long as you're pretending that there's a potential venue between West Iranian negotiations that de-emphasizes the Russian off-ramp, it's not going to get the attention it needs. It's always going to be on the back burner or not even out of the refrigerator. What you need to do is shut down the potential of direct negotiations, and therefore the United States will turn to Russia. And before that was insane, but hell, now we got the United States and Russia working together in the Security Council to pass resolutions about Syria, to shut down anti-Russian resolutions that used to pass with American support all the time. We're in a new age, and if they continue diplomatic improvements, we're seeing the potential where the United States would be willing to hand off to Russia the responsibility for taking the lead, at least initially, on getting the Iranian nuclear program restructured in a way that doesn't make it conducive for escalation into a military program. Because that's all we want. That's what Trump says he wants. He's not after regime change anymore. He wants to get rid of that and get Iran back on the track of lifting sanctions and being part of the normal world. I take him at face value. So there is this potential of Russia and China helping the United States out. And as you said, Iran sat down with those leaders, I think that this was the direction that that we were heading. I don't know how. Right now, we need smart people to give the United States an off ramp. This is what we need. And to be honest, the way this thing is cured is we get Israel to stop bombing Gaza and to resume the ceasefire and to send humanitarian goods back in. That cures. It doesn't cure the whole thing, but it stops the trigger for the Houthi. And then once you can get the Houthi to back off, then you can move in and try and create a framework that, doesn't allow for hair trigger responses like this. And then, once Iran has better relations and stuff, we could gradually simmer down tensions in the Middle East so that, we don't have the ever-present threat of Houthi intervention or Israeli intervention. But the first thing that has to happen, the only way this gets solved, it's not going to be solved through military strength. The only way this gets solved is the way it was solved to begin with. A ceasefire, humanitarian goods, Israel standing down. Is the Trump administration capable of doing that? I don't know. I'm losing hope every day that they are, but that's the only way we get out of this.
As you mentioned today, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump talked to each other. And it seems that it took an hour to talk about, I don't know, whatever is going on in Ukraine. But Donald Trump, before yesterday, he was talking about he's going to bring up the case of nuclear power plant. What does he want to do with that? Because that's under the control of Russians. I don't see that Russia would give up on that.
I mean, first of all, we have to assume that this isn't happening in a vacuum, meaning that the first time Vladimir Putin hears about this is in this conversation. So we have to assume that it has been part of past conversations and that the United States and Russia have exchanged ideas and concepts on this. I mean, first of all, I hate to say things because I know that the conversation ended and Trump was saying he was going to provide an immediate readout. So I'd really love to see that readout before I commit to a conversation that I have no idea what happened. But
I don't see that coming, by the way, Scott. It doesn't seem that would happen, but let's assume that.
But we know that the Ukrainians, first of all, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant was an integral part of Ukraine's power generation infrastructure. And in any post-conflict, world, Ukraine would want to have that energy generation capability brought back under its auspices. So there could be a negotiation that allows for some sort of joint operation or let the Ukrainians operate it as part of a joint commission that sees the power not only go to Ukraine, but also be shared with the other regions that it used to be plugged into, some sort of normalization of this where the Ukrainians save face, a face-saving gesture, a nod towards sovereignty. I think that I don't know if the Russians will yield territory that they're on. Meaning, I don't think the United States is going to be successful in telling the Russians you have to give up a territory. I do think the United States is going to make a play. I don't know how successful they'll be as the territory that Russia has never occupied and or that doesn't occupy now and is unlikely to occupy anytime soon. That this be called Ukraine. For instance, the right bank of Kherson. Now, every Russian watching this is going to start throwing darts at my photograph on a wall and calling me bad names. I'm not the one making the connection. I'm just saying that I think that's part of the argument that the Trump administration is going to make. And the question is, is Russia willing to go back to, is Putin willing to go back to the Duma and have the Duma debate, in order to bring it into this war that Russia will yield the right bank of Kherson and yield. I don't think Russia can yield any part of the Donbass. The Donbass and Crimea are Russia forever. But we know that Kherson and Zaporizhia weren't intended. They were going to be returned as part of the Istanbul communique, and it's only because of the referendum. But the referendum, the results should be respected to the extent that what Russia controls is what Russia owns. But to bring a peace to this, the idea that Ukraine now is to give up territory that it's successfully held onto through force of arms, I don't know if that's an area where Russia will be willing to compromise or not. I think it's an area that the United States is going to be pushing Russia to compromise. And again, it depends what the United States puts on the table to compensate. If you told the Russians that by buying into this, by treaty, we will get international recognition of Crimea, the Donbass, and these territories, and there will be no chance of anybody saying that it's just temporary, because that's one of the things that Russia is concerned about, is that a ceasefire that says, yes, Russia gets to hold these territories, but it's temporary, only creates the conditions for war down the road. Russia wants perm. So if you're willing to trade international recognition of these territories as Russia forever, but Russia has to let Ukraine keep the territories that it has successfully defended, is that a compromise that Russia is willing to make in those exchanges? And then, to add to that would be, if you're going to ask the Ukrainians to shrink the size of their military, you have to reward their military for the defense that it has conducted. You can't ask the military to retreat and be shrunk. I mean, that is the humiliation stacked upon humiliation. I'm not saying that, from a Russian perspective, the Ukrainians don't deserve to be humiliated, but from a peace perspective, you don't build from that. So maybe the idea is that if you're going to put pressure on the Ukrainians to reduce their military, that you acknowledge that their military actually defended Ukraine successfully in areas in Kherson and Zaporizhia, and you give them that credit, so that when the military is reduced, it's done as a matter of honor, that they can say, we successfully defended Ukraine. We have some honor attached to this what's happening to us right now. Denazification is going to be an issue. How do you get to the elections, and who's going to be qualified to be in the elections? And how does Russia have guarantees that the next president will in fact work with the Duma to create constitutional amendments or changes in the constitution, maybe a new constitution that gives the Russian population of Ukraine the rights that the Russians have demanded they have, right to their language, religion, their culture, not to be oppressed? And how do you outlaw the ideology of Bandera, this Ukrainian nationalism that has taken Ukraine down the path of destruction? How do we get there? I know Russia has identified people that it would like to bring in, but again, that's a big ask on the part of Ukraine and Europe if you're not giving Ukraine anything in return. Odessa, how do you deal with Odessa? I mean, Odessa cannot stay with Ukraine if the British get to build a military base there. So there has to be demilitarization, no NATO presence. I'd say there has to be maybe a joint commission. The Russians have to get into Odessa and be part of that, at least for a little while, to make sure that it has been demilitarized. Buffers in Sumy, and along the line of contact, you have to physically separate the Ukrainian military from that. Who's going to monitor that buffer? What troops are going to go in? It's not going to be the British and the French or anybody from Europe. So who's going to come in? And then what are the mechanisms of reporting, and how do you all nail that down? There's a lot out there that's going to require compromises on both sides. But ultimately, Russia has to get its strategic objectives: no Ukraine and NATO, demilitarization, denazification, and permanent recognition of Russian borders. I think that most of these issues had been talked about. That's my guess, is that most of these issues had been talked about, and that this 1 hour conversation was to nail down the details and identify any potential outstanding issues so that they can be focused upon for rapid resolution. I think Russia is serious about bringing this conflict to an end, but it has to be done in a way that, gives Russia what it wanted when this conflict started. The key question is, what is Ukraine going to get out of this? I don't think Ukraine gets to keep a Zelensky type presidency or things like that. But you have to be careful how you deal with Ukraine, because if it's done too harshly, too one-sided, you're never going to get Europe to buy into this. This has to be done in a way that Europe saves face, meaning, if it weren't for our intervention, Russia would have had all of Ukraine. But because we stood strong against Russia, the peace settlement, we've retained, aspects of Ukrainian sovereignty, this, that, and the other thing. Who knows? Maybe Russia has to go back to its pre-war stance that Ukraine, could join the European Union at some point. But now the European Union stopping being a political economic structure and starting to become militarized. Well, you can't replace NATO with the European Union and speak. So this is a complicated problem. And like I said, before I go too much further, I really want to know what the two guys talked about, so that there's some reality to my assessment, as opposed to me just pulling things out of thin air.
Here is what White House said. They said that the conversation between Trump and Putin has concluded, and it lasted nearly 2.5 hours.
It's a big conversation.
Yeah, big conversation. It did many issues. Do you think that we're going to see the same sort of talk between the United States and Europeans, or at this stage they're not considering that?
This is a problem between the United States and Russia right now. We have to, before we go to the Europeans, we have to have a finished deal, or something close to a finished deal. I'm encouraged by 2.5 hours. I am. When you originally said an hour, I was like, that's not enough time. That's not enough time. But 2.5 hours is enough time. It means that they were working through details. And when you have leaders at that level working through details, they don't want to walk away with a no. They want to walk away with a yes, or we're going to get back to this one. We just have to work things out. So I'm encouraged by the length of the conversation. Remember, the length of the first conversation was 90 minutes, hour and a half. This conversation went on for an additional hour. That means that details, and they were trying. If this was a short conversation, that means that, because there's no way this was a short conversation and good. A short conversation meant that they couldn't find any common ground and the conversation ended. 2.5 hours mean that they were working together over this. That's a long conversation. And, it doesn't guarantee a successful outcome, but it at least shows that both sides were trying to achieve something good. And I don't know. I mean, you see the statement. Is it a positive statement? Is it a statement saying that, there were positive results?
It didn't mention anything. It says that Donald Trump would talk with the press right after the conversation, but nothing came out so far. We don't know what would.
Well, I mean, 2.5 hours. First of all, I think the first thing that has to happen is your team has to sit down and say, okay, what the hell just happened? What did we agree to? Because, it sounds to me like they have a structure. I've just, in past experience, you have a structure. But then what happens is, as they start to talk, they deviate off the script and they start moving down and they get into this issue and then they come back. And so sometimes you have to take a pause and say, okay, let's bring everything together and see what we got, see what we've agreed upon, see where we're at before you go public with it. So I do think that, again, I'm not discouraged by this. I would hope to see something positive out of the Trump White House, even if it's lacking in details. What I would like to hear from the president is that they had a very constructive talk, and that's pushed them further down the path towards, bringing about a peaceful resolution to the conflict. That would be, as opposed to, well, there's things that we can't do. We're going to have to tighten the sanctions, and we're going to have to do this, and we're going to have to do that, and resume arms. We're going to have to put pressure on Russia. That would be a disastrous outcome. I'd like to hear him say, we pushed this further. This is a complicated problem, but we've pushed this further. We've solved some problems. We've identified others, but we're going to work together on a solution to make everybody happy. I don't see them, again, I'm not in charge of this at all, but I don't see them taking an incomplete product to Europe. I think what you have to do is you have to nail down what you're going to nail down with the Russians. Now, if there's a problem, for instance, peacekeeping, let's say Russia agreed to peacekeeping in principle, but now you have to identify the forces. You may have to take that to the Europeans and say, okay, stand down, we're going to have peacekeeping, but you're not going to be involved in it. No European troops whatsoever. It's going to be,
maybe
look,
Brazilian troops can be.
I saw speculation on that. Brazilian, Indian, Chinese, South African. That's BRICS.
Yeah. Yeah. Scott, do you think that Meloni said that the way that United Kingdom and France is dealing with the peacekeepers, with the case of peacekeepers and sending troops to Ukraine, doesn't make sense for Italy? But do you see the capability in the Trump administration? Do you see the leverage in the Trump administration to force United Kingdom and France to accept that, to get along with that, or we're going to see some sort of attrition between the Trump administration and these two key European countries?
They're not key European countries. Let's not elevate them to that status. When the British can put 10,000 troops and that's it, you're not a key European country. And France can't put much more than that. You're not a key European country. They're wannabes. They want to be this. But notice every time they speak, everything, for instance, Keir Starmer says is predicated on an American backstop. And Macron, same thing. They know they can't do this without America backing them up. So I'm Donald Trump and I'm not going to back you up. I've already said that. Why do I care about anything you say? You're irrelevant. You're just talking to please yourself. I mean, it's like my kids. If Daddy, they're grown kids. This never happened, but Daddy, we want to go to Disney World. We want to go to Disney World. So it's not going to happen. We're not going to Disney World this year. Well, Daddy, we put together a plan on what we're going to do in Disney World. And on day 2, you get to play golf. But we get to, guys, we're not going to Disney World. But Daddy, we have a plan and we've done the plan all you want. I don't care. We're not going to Disney World. Isn't going to happen. Starmer and Macron want to go to Disney World. And Trump has said, you're not going to Disney World. Isn't going to happen. I don't care what kind of plans they come up with. They're irrelevant. They can't get to Disney World by themselves. They need me to take them to Disney World. They need me to pay for it. They need me to do everything. So that's the reality. Europe is just so irrelevant at this point. It's not even funny. They're incapable of doing anything on their own. And they know that. That's why you have Ursula von der Leyen speaking of, bankrupting further generations with 800 billion euros of military rearmament, which just makes me laugh because Germany already did this. You remember 2022, Olaf Scholz did his 100 billion euro revitalization of the German military. Wow. How'd that go? Made them weaker because they borrowed 100 billion from themselves, 14% interest rate, I think it was. And one of the first things that happened is started paying back the loan. So the loan went from 100 billion down to about 60 billion. So they're already out 40 billion. And then things had to be purchased over time, which means as they start to purchase, the loan comes due. They have to start making payments again. And by last year, they had run out of money and they had nothing to show for it. 100 billion euro for military rebuilding, and Germany had nothing to show for it. They were actually weaker because they asked for money to keep the programs going, and they gave them a budget that was below the cost of inflation, which means that the cost of doing business, the money you were given, is going to be down a certain percentage, and Germany had to cut. They had to cut capability. So they invested $100 billion, and they had to cut capability. Let me tell you the reality. Ursula von der Leyen is going, if they put through this 800 billion thing, that one, they're going to bankrupt themselves. It's going to be horrible for their economy. But in the end, they will get a dysfunctional military that is substantially weaker than the military they had going into this process. So they're going to spend $800 billion to make themselves weaker. That's the outcome. Because they're trying to fix a house that they think all it needs is a spare roof, a new roof, maybe some new windows, and fix up the heating system. And what they don't realize is the house has black mold, termites, rusted through, the foundations cracked and collapsed. There's what do they call those holes, that sinkhole under the ground. And as you start to move, the house is going to collapse in, and you're going to be left with all your money invested and no house. That's the reality of Europe's security situation today. They have a military that was built on a foundation predicated on Cold War realities that no longer exist. Their military has to be torn down and rebuilt completely. If they try to fix what they have by investing all this money into it, they're just going to blow through that money and they're going to get nothing in return. There is no European defense industry complex capable of replacing the United States. And our defense industry complex is a multiple trillion dollar venture. So right off the bat, they can't even afford to fix their defense industries. They think they're going to replace the F-35 is not a great airplane, but it's a 5th generation airplane. They think they're going to replace that with something built in Europe. The best Europe produces today are old 4th generation aircraft. They have no 5th generation aircraft capabilities. None. They're never going to get them. They don't have that. They don't have that capacity. And they can't produce the scale. The Europeans are insane, literally insane.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us today. Let's see what would happen, what would come out of the conversation between Trump and Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It's either going to make my day or I'm going to go get drunk.
Hope they're going to make. I would be so much optimistic if they can get some sort of agreement that would influence. I believe that would influence the situation in the Middle East in a positive manner.
Stability generates stability.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.